Joanne Yawitch is the Chief Executive of the National Business Initiative. We're talking about issues of sustainability. And do you think business really has got a firm grasp in South Africa of the issue of sustainability? Or does business live like most South Africans in the here and now?
I think that by and large business lives in the here and now, but I think that there is an increasing understanding particularly amongst big corporates, of the importance of sustainability and also of the opportunities, the business opportunities that could arise from a more sustainable approach to business. So I don't think it's a picture that's all doom and gloom. I think there's some pretty good stuff happening, but clearly there's a long way to go.
When it comes to the integrated report, though, how honest are companies when it comes to the issues of sustainability, when it comes to reporting these things in a physical form?
I think, again, it varies hugely from company to company. I think the companies that are doing stuff, so if they've got a program or if they've got an approach that really places sustainability as a fairly central issue in their business, their integrated report will reflect that. I think if you aren't doing anything, you've got to sort of cobble together a story, and I think those stories don't resonate. I think that if you're doing stuff, it really does resonate.
How much cobbling is happening?
I think that the integrated report is something that business, my sense is still struggling with about what this thing is and how to make it work. So I think there probably is a fair amount of cobbling. But I think that over time, as companies begin to understand what is required of them better and begin to produce better quality of reports, I think that that in itself hopefully will begin to impel a different kind of thinking.
We talk about companies, but of course it comes down to individual leadership. Exactly. If the chief executive has bought into the idea of integrated reporting, sees a financial benefit and sustainability benefit as well, surely then that company is going to be more effective.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think you already see it. I mean, I think that there are outstanding corporate leaders who've taken up a challenge, they've taken risks, they've given space, they've integrated sustainability issues into their core business, and I think they're reaping the benefits of it. I think those are probably at this point in time still fairly much in a minority. Is
it fair to say that too often, though, the issue of governance, the issue of reporting is an administrative process rather than an integral process to the way in which the business is run?
I think that's true. I think that to an extent it probably, well, if you're doing good stuff in the company, you can feed it into your integrated report. I think also what I've seen is that it very much depends is the nature of the report and what is it intended to achieve understood at a leadership level? Does the overall leadership of the organization understand it? And if they do, are they going to get the people who do it? Are they going to be given the authority to make this thing real? Those are the issues that I think have to be addressed. And if they don't, I think you do find someone sitting in a sustainability unit or somewhere else who's given this as a task. And then I think it does become a kind of tick the box and pull a set of information together.
You worked in government, you worked in the Department of Environmental Affairs, and during that time you would have seen companies being dragged kicking and screaming to the sustainability table, I suspect. Are you finding that business is more proactive now in its approach?
I think business is much more proactive than it was at that point in time. I think that the kind of legislative reform from the government side created sort of a compliance. I mean, there was a compliance issue that came in. I think that what the government is not terribly good at doing is putting in place a set of incentives. But I think that what has happened internationally is that there's a much greater understanding of the business benefits of a sustainability approach now than there was 5 or 10 years ago. And I think that that's what South African, progressive South African companies are beginning to latch onto, is this is an opportunity, and how do we organize ourselves to maximize and benefit from that opportunity, whether it's saving on your energy costs or your water costs, or whether it's looking at new product innovation. I think there's beginning to be an understanding of the possibilities.
You were a negotiator at COP17. You've been part of the climate negotiations, and that was seen as something of a talk shop from the outside anyway. I'm sure you feel from the inside that there was huge progress being made. But when one looks at the role of sort of the global state and the role of companies within that environment, are companies really making an effort to be greener? They're paying lip service to it because it's trendy, and maybe they'll save some money if they cut their water and power usage.
I think that internationally there's quite a strong thrust towards sustainability. Big companies internationally see this as an important thing. I think there's beginning to be a much wider understanding of the fact that the planet is running out of resources, and that if you are going to survive as a business and if we're going to survive as a planet, you've got to do things differently. So I think that is a much sharper understanding internationally than it is in a country like South Africa, although we do have a number of companies in South Africa that actually are at the cutting edge of that international movement.
What do we need to do, though, to get South African society and South African corporates up to that level where we begin to pay proper attention rather than lip service?
I think that one of the things that South African companies need to be able to identify much more clearly is what are the sustainability-related business risks. So, for example, I mean, I think that if you look at the floods in Thailand last year, if you look at what happened to a company like Honda who had their plant there, or if you look at microchips, exactly. Suddenly, the issue of the environment started to affect international and global supply chains. And that brings a new kind of thinking. So the question then is, what do you do to mitigate against that? How well do you understand your environment? What can you do into the future? It's that kind of thinking that I think needs to be brought into companies.
And in a globally integrated environment, it's suddenly, if India, for example, decides to ban cotton exports for a week or two,
exactly,
what happens to the price of clothing?
Exactly.
And until we begin to feel the impact of that in this highly integrated globe in which we live, don't necessarily appreciate just how tightly strung we are, perhaps.
Exactly, and I think that the dependencies are tight in a globalized world. So I think, and I think that understanding is starting to penetrate. What it means at an actual operational company level is a very different kind of thing. Our experience, we run the carbon disclosure program in South Africa, and one of the very interesting things is that this was the fourth or fifth report that we ran this year, was that increasingly companies were starting to report on how they were starting to change the way they actually operate in order to address their carbon emissions. Now, that's a new thing. So it took a couple of years of measuring, then obviously a set of discussion about what that was mean, and now what we're starting to see is what are the changes. So I think it's also a process that does take time.
Progress being made indeed. Joanne Yawitch is with the National Business Initiative.